Hello and welcome to this ACE Insights webinar organised by ourselves, ACE, and affiliate members ForrestBrown. And it's about the importance of research and development tax credits. Hi, I'm Ian Parker and I'm the Commercial and Affiliates Manager at ACE. And I guess the reason why you're tuning in is because R&D tax relief can offer a valuable cash flow for support for ACE members. But before claiming that incentive, or even if you already claim, to be quite honest, there are some vital recent changes that HMRC's approach to R&D tax relief has made that you need to know about. So in this webinar, ACE's R&D tax partner, ForrestBrown, will explain all you need to know. And at the end of the presentation, there'll be a Q&A session, as we always have, with the team from ForrestBrown, and I'm sure they would more than be happy to hear any questions you've got. But before we start, can we just give you a couple of housekeeping issues there? So if you want to ask a question, as ever, make sure you use the chat function in your control panel, and we'll endeavour to answer as many questions as possible. But don't worry if you're not able to get your question answered. We'll answer as many as we can, but we will also have time to look at the follow-up of the questions after the webinar is finished. So don't worry about that too much. And also, if you miss anything, then we'll be uploading it onto our website in the next few days. So if you want to listen to it again because you missed some vital information, then feel free to do so again. Right now, all I want to say is, before I hand over, is you'll notice that we did a poll. We had a poll showing at the beginning of the session. Please, hopefully you've filled it in, and I'm sure that our colleagues from ForrestBrown will be looking at the results before they start their presentation, because it could well provide some interesting information for the presentation itself. So without further ado, I'd like to just hand over now to our speakers from ForrestBrown.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. And hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. As Ian mentioned there, yes, we served a poll question, and here are the results. And we will be touching on sort of HMRC's scrutiny and how they are approaching this incentive, because over the last few years. My name is Jack. I'm part of the education and awareness team at Forrest. Those of you who don't know us, we're a specialist tax advisory firm, and we are affiliate members of ACE. And our remit is to support the ACE membership to make use of R&D tax relief. All that we do at ForrestBrown is support companies with the R&D incentive, and we are incredibly passionate about the positive benefits and impacts that the incentive can have, which is why we're really keen to speak with ACE members today to give you an update on these ongoing changes. And what we have called a era. So delighted to take you through that today. Next slide. So we've been working with ACE for a couple of years now. We've been working with a number of members for even longer than that, for several years, and access the R&D incentive. And the way that we support is through our multidisciplinary team. So by providing access to chartered tax advisors and chartered accountants, a team of sector specialists who are ex-engineers with an industry background, and a quality assurance team that includes a couple of ex-HMRC tax inspectors, that gives us a really unique perspective, which is great, all working together to be available and to support the ACE membership with the ability to sort of fully harness this incentive and to access the benefits. So before I introduce our speakers, very quickly, our agenda today, as I say, there's been a number of ongoing changes, and what we want to do is give you some detail around that, but importantly, explain how you can respond to those changes. So in part one, we're going to be looking at how the relief applies to the work of engineering firms of ACE members. Then we're going to come on to part 2, explaining those recent changes in HMRC's approach, and importantly, sort of 3 key things that you need to know. And then in the final part, some practical steps that your business can take to set yourselves up for success when it comes to making use of R&D tax relief. Now, without further ado, speaking with me today to run through the content are 2 of my colleagues, Gareth Randall and Adam Kotas. Welcome to you both, gents. I will let you introduce yourselves.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. Hi, everyone. It's Adam here at ForrestBrown. I'm a director at ForrestBrown. I am a chartered tax advisor, nearly 15 years experience of advising companies on how to access incentives and reliefs. Really looking forward to just covering the sorts of changes we're seeing, the sort of scrutiny HMRC are applying. Saw the poll results, interesting to see some different experience on whether you've sort of had any interaction with HMRC over the last 18 months in relation to R&D claims. So it'd be good to talk through today. Looking forward to any questions that you have.
Sure. Hi, and yeah, afternoon, everybody. So I'm Gareth from ForrestBrown's technical team. I'm a professional structural and civil engineer by background. I've been 20 years in the business or in the industry before joining ForrestBrown last year to assist with their construction related claims and handle anything sort of in the built environment, really. So generally my role on the claim side of things is to have the technical discussions and look for qualifying activities that can be put forward for tax credits.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, in part 1, we're going just to recap what it is that engineering firms can actually claim for. And the reason for this is that we've seen a rising level of misinformation and incorrect advice when it comes to qualifying activities. And with the sort of increased scrutiny that HMRC is showing, it's sort of more important than ever now that claims are accurate and meet the legislation. So Adam, to start us off with the discussion today, do you want to touch on why now is an important time for ACE members to be thinking about?
Yeah, thanks, Jack. If you go back to when the government created the R&D incentive, the aim was really to help firms increase productivity in the UK. And we've seen that it's a real boost to firms who are able to confidently access the R&D incentive. I think what we're seeing at the moment is that as companies respond to current events over the past 12 or 18 months, as well as HMRC changes, the R&D incentive can play quite a big part in really helping either mitigate some of the impacts of the challenges that have been faced, or to simply support the company as it develops, evolves, and especially as we're seeing lots and lots of projects either come back online or really take off. Some of the types of things that we've got on screen, if you think about how generous the R&D incentive, whether you're making an R&D claim under the SME scheme in the UK, you can recover around a quarter of costs that qualify for R&D, or under the RDEC incentive, where you're recovering around 10% of costs. It's a pretty generous incentive, and I think it can support cash flow challenges. We've seen PI insurance increases. We've seen challenges around projects which are not just UK based, and certainly there's been an impact there, and the cash flow support from the R&D credits can play quite an important role in that.
Fantastic, thank you, Adam. So moving on to have a look at the definition. We've got it up on the slide here. Can you translate what this allows engineering businesses to claim for, and importantly, what can't be considered research and development?
Yeah, I think we've got the definition on screen from the government guidelines. So for tax purposes, this states that R&D takes place when a project seeks to achieve an advance in science or technology through the resolution of scientific or technological uncertainty. I think a lot of businesses in the audience have or will have explored R&D credits, whether you're currently making a claim or have done in the past, and will have grappled with what this really means. It can be, I think, a bit off-putting, hard to decipher, covers a whole range of industries. I think when we tend to look at it, we tend to think about technical aspects of projects. We tend to think about finding or working on technical solutions. It could be about projects which have trialed something new, could be related to products and integration of products, but very commonly, certainly in the engineering sector, it's about processes or technique, or simply client or site specific challenges on projects. That really that element of seeking to improve one of those things, remembering that that improvement could have really tangible consequences, or it could result in it could be a cost saving or time saving through that technical solution. So I think if you've done this, applying science or technology, you're on the right path to looking at, is this an R&D project that would be worth talking about? Gareth, is there anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, sure. I think, and I think we've got a slide on that, but coming up. But there are kind of many broad strokes ways of looking at things. Say an R&D journey can start with something as abrupt as what you're seeing here. I mean, essentially comes down to sometimes aspirational necessity, but are you looking at doing something safer, cheaper, faster, greener? Are you looking to undertake innovative work due to unusual site or project restrictions? They can be sort of the start of a journey, just as a simple point. But when we get into the specifics, I think we've got a slide which again, which pops up in a second. But again, fairly broad strokes. If we jump to the next one, you got me there. Hello. There we go. So I know this is these are very broad, but of course we've got quite a diverse audience. But just to pick up on a couple of avenues to start exploring on. So I know we've got in there, like there's a mention of new regulations in there. Again, there are all sorts of things in there. We've had a number of post-Grenfell case studies, things around facades, cavity barriers, fire stops. So the list goes on. There's technical issues that have arisen from the implementation of the SUDS regulations in Wales and the kind of the aftermath thereof. We've had a number of complex projects around moving towards net zero carbon, both on the design side, but strangely enough, also on the software development side of things, working with consultants there. There's a mention there of modern methods of construction. Of course, that's very topical at the moment. You look at the new construction playbook and how that's rolling out and sort of pushing towards that. And obviously it's gaining momentum there. We've had some good studies where there was one only a couple of weeks ago. We spoke with a client about a pod design for bathrooms. It was quite a complex one. Normally it's a four-sided container, but this one needed to have floor-to-ceiling glass on one side, which integrated with the facade, and there was a whole series of knock-on implications that went with that. So it was a nice one on that side of things. And then there's quite again on the varied side of things. We've even got clients who are doing things like bricklaying robots, and we had a consultant who was doing some very blue sky R&D, looking at building a big glass brick vault using robots. So again, like the opportunities are extremely broad and varied. But again, sort of any areas where in engineering where you're encountering complex problems, there might be avenues to explore there for R&D.
Great, thanks, Gareth. We're going to move on now to part 2 and exploring what these changes have been. R&D tax relief isn't a new incentive by any means. It's been around for over 20 years. And in that time, businesses from all sectors, not just engineering, have been benefiting greatly from the relief. But it's in the last few years that a shift in the R&D advice market and the quality of claims that are being submitted has really occurred. And that has influenced HMRC to change their approach towards the incentive. Adam, just to kind of elaborate on this, can you tell us what's changed and why ACE members need to pay serious attention to this?
Yep, thanks, Jack. I think R&D tax relief has played a really important role in supporting a lot of projects. We often see it in some ways as a return on investment, because that investment is often of a very technical nature. And when it is coming through to support businesses and projects, it's got a really, really positive impact. And naturally, forget HMRC for a minute, but naturally the government is really keen to support that for businesses, and certainly sees it as a major strand of where the UK economy is going. What we have seen, though, over certainly the last 2 to 3 years, is that the generosity of the R&D tax relief has fueled somewhat of a competitive industry, and that naturally has attracted advisors who are not offering a good level of service and advice to businesses. The knock-on impact of that is that in response to an increase in what are frankly poorly prepared R&D claims, HMRC has shifted more emphasis to questioning and policing the quality of claims that are then submitted. This does mean that it has some unintended consequences, but we've certainly seen HMRC increase its workforce. It's hired another 100 compliance officers into the R&D team to be able to have the resource to focus on asking additional questions on R&D claims that may well not have the supporting information that's necessary to back up what's being claimed. And then the impact of that is that more and more companies who don't necessarily have an awareness of how to deal with that scrutiny from HMRC are coming to us and saying, look, we think we've got valid work here, but the questions are either making us doubt that we have, or they're very difficult to answer because we don't know how to explain to HMRC in the right way that our work is the right, fits within the guidelines. And there are naturally some claims that don't stand up to scrutiny, but where companies have valid activity, often the difficulty is in confidently and concisely explaining that to HMRC and then making sure that the supporting information sits behind that. Jack, I think we're going to look a bit more at HMRC's approach to this as well.
In part 3, we're going to be touching on sort of what you mentioned there, Adam, some of those steps that companies can take should you find yourself in that situation. But before that, we're just going to give a bit more detail on how HMRC have responded to essentially kind of better review and ensure the quality of the claims that are being submitted. Gareth, are you happy to talk through these headline changes?
Yeah, sure. And I know sort of Adam's just touched on just the highlights of things, but maybe just to go in a bit more, I guess on the quality side of things, again, sort of HMRC doubling down on their focus on quality. I think really, a few years ago, the awareness of the incentive was relatively low, and HMRC were trying to raise awareness, but in doing so, that also allowed many poor quality claims to get through. So, in fact, you've probably seen the case not all that long ago where HMRC picked up a quite a significant fraudulent scheme trying to use this incentive. So, these things have been picked up. But obviously now with that lesson learned, HMRC have absolutely rightfully taken to actively addressing this level of error and fraud in R&D claims potentially. And I mean, the whole point of the incentive is to encourage businesses to be innovative. So they want to make sure that the tax relief is actually going to the right place. So I mean, really, what does that mean for those making use of the incentive? It's essentially that the chances of HMRC requesting substantiation has increased significantly from what it used to be. I think, and looking at the second point of new compliance staff, which Adam mentioned. So again, how are they doing this exactly? How are they increasing their awareness? Well, so they've employed 100 new compliance officers, which I think something like more than triples their previous numbers. So now they just simply have capacity to. So I mean, the initial way that this attention first manifested was essentially in nudge letters being issued. So basically asking, the question of, well, that claim you submitted, are you sure? But now it's fair to expect that the proportion of claims being reviewed and inquired into will increase as the year progresses. So again, what does that mean if you're already claiming historically or intending on claiming? I mean, in fairness, it's much the same as in engineering, really. Just make sure that the quality of control around your claim is well advised and robust, and keep good records in case they're needed for substantiation. And then really the third point in it, and I realize this is on the severe end of the spectrum, but essentially looking at penalties and discovery notices, it means that if HMRC are suitably unconvinced by your latest claim, that they are well within their rights to go back and look at past claims as well. I think the main thing to stress is that there's a common misconception that a paid out claim is an approved claim. And really the reality is that you can only be confident that HMRC has actually approved your claim if it's been through an inquiry. So again, I just urge against being complacent. Don't just sleepwalk your way through a claim and send that through to HMRC, because that's potentially just asking for trouble.
Thanks, Gareth. A big update there, I guess, on the new approach, a lot of information. Adam, if businesses watching today are going to kind of take away one thing in particular from those changes, what would it be?
Yeah, I'll tell you what we've seen, because I think the message on the screen is really clear. HMRC has shifted its approach. There are questions that it is asking during the inquiry process, which really do indicate a shift in approach. So now's the time to look at the support that's there, look at the claim process, look at the methodology to determine the costs. Importantly, look at your contracts to determine whether they support the scheme that you're making a claim under. If you've made claims in the past, just as Gareth pointed out, don't assume that what you've been doing is still good enough for the future. HMRC has evolved its approach to claims, and what you were doing, which may have been approved and paid out, may no longer be in line with current HMRC thinking and approach. So, the R&D provides great support. Let's not be too negative about it. Inquiries happen; they happen in a relatively small proportion of cases. But every company should look at both the value: are we getting everything we can from this? But also the risk point, to ensure that if you need to sit in a room and defend the claim that you're making with HMRC, then you can do. So I would say you may have some support and advice. If you're partnering with an advisor, make sure that the methodology and the quality behind that will really stand up to HMRC's new level of scrutiny. And even more important before that, make sure that you've had open, transparent discussions about what that current picture looks like, and that you're doing everything you need to do as a business to make sure you're comfortable with that.
Now, in the final part, we're going to be sharing some practical recommendations that you can take right now to be prepared as we enter this new era for R&D tax relief. And Adam and Gareth, we've got some steps here. Can we talk through these kind of one by one and essentially just sort of outline what it is that engineering businesses can be doing to set themselves up for success in the future?
Yeah, sure. I'll look at the first one. So again, on quality checking your advisors. So applying a suitable level of due diligence, really, when you're making that appointment and choosing to sort of renew agreements and so on. I mean, look, you should at the very least start, review the firm. Are they regulated? If not, you need to be careful. I mean, really, the way it works is exactly the same as in engineering. So a reputable advisor will have the relevant professional memberships, such as the membership of the Chartered Institute of Taxation, and they'll be accountable to those codes of conduct. So don't just assume that your advisor is. Ask them the question, because if they aren't regulated, then you're potentially putting yourself at risk. I think secondly as well, just look at reviewing the team that they offer. Do they offer you access to both tax and engineering experts? So again, don't just assume. Ask if your advisor has the necessary technical knowledge to support the financial side. I think it's fair to say that an advisor with technical industry expertise on their team can very efficiently work with you to filter through your work and look at identifying R&D activities. And then they can also make sure that these activities are covered in the right way to minimize technical and financial risk, but make sure at the same time that you're also not leaving anything on the table. I think as well, just also look at the service that they offer. So do they actually understand your business and what it does? Have they tailored their process to meet your needs as the client? Have they, again, sort of deployed the right technical expertise to work with you, rather than just having a generic type of service? Again, same sort of thing as before, just making sure that you're taking the right steps to minimize your risk of inquiry from HMRC, but at the same time, making sure that you're getting the value out of your claim that you should be.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Quick one on the second point, understanding your contract. This has just become more important than ever. We've had lots of support we've provided to companies where they hadn't realised that their contract didn't include support in the event that HMRC asked additional questions. Just be aware of that. I think key point here is, if you are in any doubt, ask those questions. No one who's providing quality advice will disguise any sort of unethical terms in a long legal document. Really important, partly because at the same time, your advisor should be helping you to review your own contracts from an R&D perspective to ensure they support the stance that you're taking with your R&D claims. Gareth, I think you're going to cover the third point.
Yeah, and this one again, sort of know your R&D tax relief claim. I mean, I think it sounds obvious. Just please take the time to review your claim. I mean, it's really important to understand exactly why the projects that are included qualify for R&D, because down the line, HMRC really has absolute right to challenge and if necessary, unpick any previous claims. So just please increase your awareness of that and make sure you've given good scrutiny to the projects that have been included. And I know I've got on the other side of things also just make sure, and I know this sounds like a crazy oversight, but just make sure that your advisor has shared your report with you. I mean, this is a serious document with big implications, and it should really be a huge red flag if you haven't actually seen what's been submitted. I think also, has your advisor worked closely with you? Have they given you that final approval and rubber stamp from your side to make sure you're happy with it? Are you also happy that it's captured all of your R&D work during the course of the year? Again, I know all of this kind of sounds obvious, but especially in the business inquiry support that we do, these are alarmingly common themes, and you can often pick up that pattern of businesses taking that first claim very seriously and then becoming I guess, progressively more blasé about it. I think it's just a case of being careful not to fall into that trap. Just make sure that your advisor is working close with you. Make sure that they're giving you the time to carry out a thorough review of the documentation before it's submitted.
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. That it sort of links to this next point, which is sort of being inquiry ready. This is simply knowing your claim process methodology inside out, making sure that you have the relevant quality assurance process undertaken on the R&D claim. And of course that, whoever you're working with has that experience and record of handling and resolving, importantly, HMRC inquiries. I think you should feel really confident that if you do have any additional questions from HMRC, that you understand what they're asking, you're clear why they're asking for the information, you have a strategy for how you're approaching the HMRC inquiry, and that's important. Just providing lots of information doesn't necessarily help drive towards a resolution, which is ultimately what you're wanting to achieve. So a lot of the other factors feed into this process of making sure any R&D claim, whether you're going to have additional questions or not, is inquiry ready.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and thanks, Adam. I think, maybe looking at the last point as well, I know this is kind of a common theme running through everything, but just to proactively review your approach. So, again, as we've spoken about earlier, what would have potentially been processed previously in the past by HMRC may no longer be sufficient. Again, don't wait for something to go wrong to review whether your approach is fit for purpose. Rather be actively taking steps to investigate if your process can be strengthened. And ask yourself, does the current approach capture the correct value of the R&D activities? So again, sort of much as I was saying earlier, do you take an appropriate amount of time for your business? Again, you don't want it to be inefficient, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that it's suitably thorough. And I guess most importantly, are you confident that the quality of your documentation is sufficient to mitigate any overall risks?
Thank you, guys. I think we're going to move on to the Q&A now. But Adam, just before we go to that, if the audience do have any questions from that content today, have around the relief and these, in particular, these changes from HMRC.
Yeah, sorry, Jack, we just lost you there. But I think in terms of any questions about anything we've discussed today, I think please do ask. Contact details are there on screen, and we'll certainly sort of circulate them around as well. I think when people think about R&D claims, they often think the support I need is either to do an R&D claim or not to do an R&D claim. And what we're certainly seeing at the moment as a result of some of the issues we've talked about today is that there's a lot more to it than that. There's a lot of different types of support that businesses are looking for that can be around maximizing value of claims. They can be around reassurance that the business is in the best position to mitigate any risk associated with R&D claims, or indeed to understand that the support is there as the HMRC approach evolves in relation to their interpretation of the tax legislation around R&D claims. So I think happy to help. Do give us a call if there's anything that would be useful to discuss. It doesn't have to be a very specific query, but it certainly can be even a general discussion of what the lay of the land looks like at the moment.
I've got a couple of questions. I got these in advance actually from a couple of colleagues who weren't able to make it today. So one of them said that, is it only this year's R&D that he could, in this tax year? In other words, can he only make a claim if it's in this current tax year, or can he go back different years?
Yeah, it's a good question and quite a common one. you can look back to make an R&D claim at the last 2 financial years. So typically, a simple example at the moment is we've a number of companies who have a 30th of June financial year end. At the moment, they can still make a claim for the years that ended 30 June 19 as well as 30 June 20, but the deadline for that 30 June 19 claim would be the end of June this year.
Okay, and there's a question that an organisation has just moved out of the SME category, debating whether they should still submit a claim for the lower rate. But are there any changes that might affect that decision?
So in terms of whether a claim should still be submitted, I would say no. There's not changes that should impact that decision. There may be sort of some commercial decisions around, can we still capture significant value? Part of the reason for that is there's some differences in the schemes between the type of categories of costs that can be included within the RDEC scheme versus the SME scheme. So important to consider that. And then I think just to expand really quickly, for companies where the claim is being made under the SME scheme, one of the key considerations at the moment, certainly if you think about the current HMRC approach, is are you as a company right to be making a claim under that scheme? Because HMRC has certainly shifted its interpretation in terms of whether that is the case.
Okay, and another one from one of my colleagues is what she said is that she claims via her accountant, but she hasn't heard about these changes. So I know what the answer is to this, but people might not generally be aware in terms of, do you work with accountants to review the claims, etc.?
Yeah, again, I think pretty common question in that with lots of different areas of tax, the in-depth part of sort of some specific areas like R&D credits aren't necessarily on the radar of everyone from an accountancy point of view. Our work is sort of working directly with accountants in a number of ways, sometimes to do R&D claims for them, sometimes simply to provide technical updates. Gareth's, great example of having sort of done that a number of times. And then the other part is we're often at the point where we're reviewing claims that have been prepared by accountants, and that's certainly something which we've done a lot of work on.
And I guess this is almost like the $64,000 question. If there was one particular thing or one particular aspect of making a claim on R&D for R&D tax credits, what do you think that would be? What is the most important thing to bear in mind if you're thinking about making a claim?
Really great question. Gareth, can I just have 20 seconds, and I'll certainly let you answer.
Yeah.
If you haven't made a claim before, I think the most important thing initially is a discussion of some of your projects and the type of technical activities that could potentially qualify, where the boundaries might be for R&D, getting that understanding of whether there's an opportunity. So I think the business and the projects, rather, if you're not making a claim, is certainly the most important thing. If you are making a claim, probably the most difficult concept around R&D credits is probably, well, whose R&D is it and which scheme should we claim under? And that's quite a long conversation, but whose R&D is it? Is it ours, the client, someone else's? Is it, and which scheme do we claim under? Certainly, I think that's, especially for the current environment, that's definitely the trickiest one. Gareth?
No, sorry, I was just overexcited there. It's just one of those questions where, sort of on my side of things, kind of coming in from the technical side. I mean, the technical aspect is everything. So you want to make sure that what you're submitting complies with the with the guidelines, and making sure that it hits the right notes as you go through. But you also want to make sure that it's being communicated to HMRC in the right way. And often there's kind of a tendency to talk at cross purposes. And again, sort of, from my engineering side of things, like certainly in the early days of doing this type of work, with managing the submissions for tax credits, I kind of came from the angle of like, well, here's the problem, here's the solution, there you go. But HMRC don't really want to hear about that. Like they want to know what you did. They want to know the inner workings of it, and the work that what were the struggles, what were the trials and tribulations, and sometimes there can be just the valid work is often there. It's just not communicated properly. So it just means taking it's kind of like a cross-pollination of expertise, I suppose, and just making sure that the valid work that you're doing is going through to HMRC in a way that's then understandable to them, and that means that you're in a good area. So it was a long-winded answer, but just make sure you're not talking across purposes, really.
I was on mute. I apologise for that. I guess it's linked to a question that somebody in the chat has asked in relation to: is there a particular focus in any specific areas from HMRC on recent inquiries you found?
Yeah, I think the inquiries cover a range of aspects, but the hardest one, I think, for people to answer relate should the companies be claiming under. That's the biggest topic at the moment across R&D claims, and where HMRC are asking additional questions. The concept of is it our R&D, and even if it is someone paying for it, and therefore should we be claiming under the SME scheme or the RDEC scheme? There's a lot of sort of grey in this, but there's also a lot of support that companies can put behind an argument to justify the position that they've taken. And I suppose conversely, if they don't have that support behind the position that they've taken, then there's an exposure to risk somewhat, because HMRC are looking at things with quite a close level of scrutiny at the moment.
And one final question, and I think we'll be rapidly coming up into our time limit. With the levelling up agenda and the massive emphasis by the government on spend in infrastructure, does that give specific opportunities, do you think, for making R&D tax credit claims? Or is it just business as usual?
And one of the reasons that there's definitely a slant of R&D credit claimants, much as there is with a lot of other large infrastructure spend, and why the levelling up agenda is so important, is that awareness is the biggest issue in terms of R&D claims. Okay, there's got to be the funding towards the projects to the companies that are looking to claim, and there's got to be the spend incurred on those projects by the companies. But a lot of the time, the reason that R&D credit claimants are skewed to different areas of the country, and the levelling up agenda is important, is because if the awareness isn't there and the expertise in terms of that support is not then there, because it's not just making a claim, it's making a valid, maximised, confident claim, then I think that's the biggest challenge that companies face, is not having the knowledge to be able to go out and confidently make that claim for the projects and costs they're incurring.
Okay, well, I think we're drawing rapidly to the end of our time now. Is there any final points that you wish to make for the benefit of our participants, so that maybe one piece of advice, or if you wished if you're tuning into this and you want more information, then feel free to get in touch with me or any one of the panelists afterwards. And I'm pretty sure that they'll be more than happy to answer any queries or inquiries that you've got. But is there one final piece of advice that you'd like to give?
No, I just add, I still think with the R&D consultation that the government has in progress, there's a really exciting opportunity to share any views on what the future of R&D credits could look like. And I do think it's quite an exciting time because the government's structuring this for the future and for it to be effective for companies in the UK. So really exciting from that perspective. Companies must still be encouraged to make R&D claims. And then just to have an awareness, please have an awareness of what the current environment looks like for R&D claims and what the HMRC thinking is on it, so that you're not sort of sat there in 6 months saying, oh, we thought we should have taken a look at this because HMRC are asking us some questions that we don't necessarily have the answers to.
Absolutely. I was going to support.
Gareth?
Yeah, I was going to support what Adam was saying. I mean, basically, treat your R&D submission with the same seriousness as essentially your, say, engineering calculations, and having that supporting evidence. Like just make sure it's there, make sure your ducks are in a row, and that you've got everything well prepared in case they do come back and ask more. You don't want to be kind of scrambling around at the last minute, when they come back and say, well, you've got a week to tell us, give us these answers, and then that's the last thing you need. Just be well prepared. I mean, it's exactly the same as in engineering. Just use the right level of scrutiny and quality control, really, and make sure you're happy with what's going through.
Okay, Jack, final thoughts?
Yeah, echoing the guys there, I think just challenge any complacency that you may have. Just that proactive review of the approach is will make a difference in the future. So we highly encourage sort of AC and AC members to do that.
Okay, so Jack had some severe difficulties with his sound during the course of this event, but our apologies for that. Hopefully we can get that resolved for Jack going forward. Anyway, we are unfortunately out of time, so many thanks for listening, and I hope you have found this very interesting and gives some opportunities for some income, which is obviously what the object of the exercise is. So my thanks to Gareth Randall, Adam Coates, and Jack Wanstall from ForrestBrown, and thank you all for your time too. Just a reminder, by the way, that we have recorded the webinar, and that will be, you'll get a link, and it'll go back onto our website, as I said before. And maybe if you fancy it, then you can forward it on to different colleagues in your organisations as well. And we'll also be adding the slides to the website. So thank you very much for attending, and have a very good afternoon, and then we'll see you the next time.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.